হ্যালো বন্ধুরা, আসসালামু আলাইকুম। দূরের ও কাছের যে যেখান থেকে আমার এই ভিডিওটি দেখছেন, আশা করি সবাই ভালো আছেন। আমি এই বাড়িটিতে দ্বিতীয়বারের মতো আসলাম। এটির সম্পর্কে আমি অতটা ভালো জানি না। তো আমরা এখানে টিকিট কাটবো। টিকিট কাটলে আমাদেরকে একজন গাইড দিবেন। তো উনি আমাদেরকে এটার সম্পর্কে আলোচনা করবেন, এই বাড়ির সম্পর্কে। আমি প্রথমবার যখন আসি তখন আমি খুবই মুগ্ধ হয়েছিলাম এখানে আসার পরে, এত সুন্দর একটি জায়গা। তো এটা সম্পর্কে আমি ডিটেলস অতটা ভালো জানি না। তো আমাদের গাইড এটা আমাদেরকে আলোচনা করবেন, ঘুরিয়ে দেখাবেন এটা সম্পর্কে, এই বাড়ির সম্পর্কে, এই বাড়ির ইতিহাস সম্পর্কে তুলে ধরবেন। তখন আমার ভিডিওর মাধ্যমে আমি চেষ্টা করব এই বাড়ির ইতিহাস তুলে ধরার জন্য। তো খুবই ইন্টারেস্টিং হবে, আশা করি আপনাদের খুবই ভালো লাগবে। দেখতে থাকুন বন্ধুরা, ভালো লাগবে, অবশ্যই ভালো লাগবে। খুবই সুন্দর একটি জায়গা, অসম্ভব সুন্দর একটি বাড়ি, অসম্ভব সুন্দর একটি জায়গা। মন ভালো করার জন্য, শরীর এবং মন সুস্থ রাখার জন্য এই একটি ট্যুরই আপনার জন্য আপাতত আমি মনে করি খুব ভালো লাগবে। ঠিক আছে বন্ধুরা, কথা না বাড়িয়ে, অনেক লম্বা ভিডিও হবে, দেখলে অবশ্যই ভালো লাগবে। শুরু থেকে শেষ পর্যন্ত দেখবেন, আশা করি সবার ভালো লাগবে। ওকে, লেটস গো।
Welcome to Westbrook, and I'm calling it Westbrook because that's what it was called when William Cutting lived here with his wife and 4 children. This was their summer home only. Summer home. Located here in Great River along the Connecticut River, which means great or wide river. Pardon me?
No.
Oh, it was named by the Secatawg Indians who lived here first. Most people want to know right from the get-go, how did Mr. Cutting make the money that enabled him to buy this property and have this beautiful manor house built? So I'll start off by giving you a little bit of a history of Mr. Cutting and how he made his money. He was born in 1850 in Manhattan. 2 years later, his brother was born, and then 2 years after that, their mother died, and his father moved to France. So they were raised by their maternal grandparents, Mr. and Mrs. Robert Bayard, in Edgewater, New Jersey. He went to Columbia College. He graduated from Columbia, and he went to Columbia Law School. He was admitted to the New York bar, but he never actually practiced law other than the law he needed for his businesses, because his grandfather tried to instill in his grandsons object lessons in how to successfully make and manage money. And he took his grandfather's advice and went into many different businesses. One of them was the railroad industry. His grandfather gave him the Alton Terre Haute in Indiana, that railroad. Then he sold that, and he then bought the Pacific and Illinois Central railroads. So he was in the railroad industry, the banking industry, insurance industry, the dredging of the New York harbor. He helped to establish a ferry service between Brooklyn and Manhattan. He purchased a seemingly worthless parcel of land in South Brooklyn and developed it into a superb system of docks and warehouses. The sugar beet industry, that's how he made his money. Now, he became interested in this area because he belonged to the Southside Sportsman's Club, which is now the Connecticut River State Park Preserve, which you can visit. It's just north of here, north of Sunrise Highway. And that was an exclusive club for very prominent gentlemen, wealthy gentlemen. I'll just drop a few names. Theodore Roosevelt belonged, Ulysses Grant, Vanderbilt, Belmont, Tiffany, and of course Mr. Cutting. And he fell in love with this area when he was going there to hunt. It was a club for men to hunt and fish. And he fell in love with this area, and when he decided he wanted a summer home, this is where he looked for property. because he and his wife had a townhouse on Madison Avenue and 72nd Street in Manhattan. So he found 931 acres located along the Connecticut River, which belonged to George Lorillard. George Lorillard was heir to a tobacco fortune, and he had a horse breeding farm here. So he purchased the 931 acres for $125,000. Sounds like,
Which
whoa.
year? Which year?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't tell you the year, 1884. Now that's kind of equivalent to $3 million now, but it doesn't take into account property values either. Then in 1886, he hired Charles Haight, an architect who also designed St. Thomas's Church in Manhattan, and he hired him to design the house and build the house for him. That was in 1886. It was built in 3 sections, and this is kind of why I like to start outside so I can show you. This section right here is the family section, and it houses some servants as well. And that was built in 1886. Then in 1888, they added the east wing, which was more rooms for more servants. And then in 1890, they built the annex. That's this portion right here. And the annex has really a dual purpose. The bottom floor was a game room, primarily for Mr. Cutting and his male friends, because it has only a urinal in it. And there were 2 rooms there. One was for cards and billiards, and the other one was a smoking room. And there was also a small pipe organ in that first room, and that great musician Albert Schweitzer once played on that pipe organ. Now the second floor, which is where your friend has his art displays, that was guest rooms. 4 guest rooms, each with its own bathroom and closet, beautiful view of the property. And of course, the guests who would come from either New York City or New Jersey, it was a long trip in those days, and they didn't come just for dinner. They would come and they would stay a while, and a week or 2 perhaps, and there was tennis courts on the property and a golf course, and of course all the water sports. Mr. Cutting had a boat, or maybe more than 1 boat. So all kinds of activities. So they had to, and they were expected to dress for dinner as well. So they brought all kinds of clothing with them, and they had to bring their servants as well because they needed help to dress. So the servants stayed on the 3rd floor. Pretty nice. Most of the property, or much of the property I should say, was designed by Frederick Law Olmsted, who also designed Central Park in Manhattan. There was a gatehouse, there is a gatehouse, and that was designed by a local architect, Isaac Green. And Frederick Law Olmsted he designed the way the driveway came, and he designed it with a curve so that when you first entered at the gatehouse, because that was the main entrance, there was no entrance the way you entered today. That's only when it became an arboretum. But when the family lived here, the gatehouse entrance was the only entrance, and it was designed, the driveway was designed so that when you were coming with your horse and carriage.
Is there an entrance from this side?
Yes, the gatehouse. Yep.
Show us
Yep.
that one.
Yep. And as you would drive around that curve, you wouldn't see the house at first, but all of a sudden it would pop into view for that wow factor. Since it was a dairy farm when he lived here, there are barns, and they were designed by Stanford White. There's a carriage house. The carriage house was designed also by Charles Haight, kind of matches the house. The house is American with Tudor influence. Let's see what I can tell you, what else I can tell you. This is the back of the house. This was considered the back of the house.
Back of the house, okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
Because the front faces the Connecticut River, that beautiful view, and the great lawn, which is
That makes sense.
Yes.
yeah, which is 4 acres. The great lawn. There are 11 chimneys and 22 fireplaces. The fireplaces work back to back. And actually the fireplaces were there just for aesthetic purposes, to look nice, because they were here in the summers. They didn't need a fireplace in the summers. And now they're closed down so that in the wintertime the heat doesn't just go up and out. There are 68 rooms and 23 bathrooms. A big house to maintain. The staff, there were 23 people who worked outside, you know, with the farm and the grounds. And then inside, about 14 to 16 servants inside. It was heated right from the get-go with coal. Coal would come up the Connecticut River on a barge, and then it would be pulled to the house by horse and wagon. Later on, they went to steam and oil heat, but at first it was coal. 19,322 square feet in the whole house, including,
house, yes.
including the annex. Okay, so why don't we go inside now, and we'll kind of pretend that we are visiting the Cutting family, and this is where the Cuttings would enter and where their guests and family would enter, through this door. So we're going to be visiting the Cutting family.
Yes.
For people to walk into the Hidden Oak Cafe. Okay? So this room is the entrance hall. It's the most elaborate room of the whole house, even though the family, the Cutting family, was really very modest and reserved. They weren't showy, you know, and the house is really, it's not that showy of a house. It's got a warm feeling. It's not like the Newport, Rhode Island homes that are very ostentatious and showy. This has got a nice feel to it. However, the family would still want you to know that they were a prominent, wealthy family. They were on Mrs. Astor's list of 400, which is where you wanted to be at that time. So that's why this room is the most elaborate. And this is the largest fireplace.
Okay, girls, you want outside?
And it's the only one that they say was ever used. On occasion, the family would come for their Christmas holiday. Not often, but sometimes they would come for Christmas and they have.
I have that butternut squash with apples.
Most of the things that you see in the house did not belong to the Cutting family, because when they left, they took most everything. But the things that did belong to them, I will make sure to point out to you and tell you which things did actually belong to the family. Notice the beautiful ceiling and the paneling. It goes, the same paneling goes up the main staircase and also into the library. It's black English oak, and it's over 400 years old. No, that's the dining room. I'll show you the library when we go in, and I'll remind you about that. Now, this is 400 years old, but the house is 138 years old. So how can that be? Well, in 1886, when the house was being built, the Cuttings went to Europe on a shopping spree. They didn't get their things from IKEA and Raymore and Flanagan and places like that. No. They went on a shopping spree in Europe, and they had a buyer with them, and the buyer helped them to purchase items for their new house. And this is one of the things that they bought, the black English oak, the paneling. Mr. Cutting saw it in an estate in England. He liked it, he bought it. So they cut it out of that estate, shipped it here, and then fit it to this room and up the staircase and in the library. The flooring is very special flooring. It's called quarter sawn hardwood parquet flooring. It's very expensive because it requires an extra process, but the good thing is it's a more stable and tightly grained flooring. And in each one of the rooms in the family section,
Woodworking, he made it in here or he imported it in from other countries?
as far as the flooring goes, I don't know. I'm sure that that was, from local artisans. Just the Black English oak was imported. So around the outside, this sculpture belonged to the Cuttings. It's 18th century and was purchased in France. It's a Greek god. It's either Silenus or Dionysus. The last family member who lived here felt it was Dionysus, who was a god of luxuriant fertility, who was addicted to the grape, probably in its liquid form. When the family moved here, in 1886, there was no electricity, so the lights were gas, and there's a pipe that takes the gas to the lights, and a little key. You can see the key that the servants would turn on. That was original. If you see a pipe leading to a light fixture, you know it was original. Then the house was electrified in 1910 by the Sable Electric Company, which, at any rate, bring them into the parlor probably for some refreshment. Parlor. They called it a parlor, but it was a living room. Tiffany windows.
আমরা ভিতরে প্রবেশ করছি।
Okay, so those are Tiffany windows. The wall covering is not original, but it was selected from a company in California that makes historical wall covering to coordinate with the colors of the Tiffany windows. But these doors work so easily. That's the craftsmanship of the time and the money that you had to pay for it, right? There's a different pattern on this side. This is oak. And the other side is cherry. Different pattern on both sides.
Oh, yes.
Okay, now we have a different pattern on the floor.
Right.
This is the chevron pattern. It's
Chevron.
the quarter sawn parquet wood flooring. This is considered the front door to the house.
This one.
That's considered the front door. And as you can see, they have a beautiful view of the Connecticut River and the Great
But
Lawn.
this is not the door.
No, this is just a window.
Window.
That's the door,
That's
right.
the door,
And this is the Black English oak, the same Black English oak as was in the entrance hall. This is a different, this is black oak also, but it's from Oxford. It wasn't from that same house that he took the other things from. Now these are original fixtures. There was gas that came to the fixtures. The ceiling is a coffered ceiling. That's original. It's been restored, but it is original. You know, all those years ago, there weren't many public libraries. So if you had the money, which the Cutting family did, you could have your own library. And that's why he had his own library. When the state took over the house and the property, they didn't want to maintain things. The house was not on view at first. For most of the years it wasn't on view. So they just covered up those bookshelves because they didn't want to maintain them. But then when it was decided that we wanted to have the house on view and we wanted to restore it, they took that paneling off and there were beautiful shelves behind them.
So how will go in other ways?
এটি একটি লাইব্রেরি, লাইব্রেরির দৃশ্যগুলো চেষ্টা করছি নেওয়ার জন্য,
All of the rooms
আর ওর মুখ থেকে শুনছি।
You can go from one room to the next and you don't have to go out into the hall and risk seeing the servants scurrying around doing their job. So there's always an adjoining door that you can go from one room to the next. Yeah. This room probably has more things that originally belonged to the Cutting family than any of the other rooms. For instance, the table and chairs are Chippendale. They did belong to the Cutting family. This is the table where they had their dinners, their dinners every night. You'll notice that there's an apple at every place. We did that in honor of Mrs. Cutting because they said that she very often put an apple at everybody's place. We're not sure why. Was it to cleanse the palate between courses, clean the teeth? Or did she, an apple a day keeps the doctor away, or did she just think it looked pretty? But she did that very often, so we have done it. The fireplace over here, this is the oldest thing in the house. It's from a French chateau. It's 15th century and it predates Columbus. The fire irons and the fire back and the andirons are from a different French chateau. The flooring, once again, that's fake. Once again, it's the quarter painted kind of a brown copper color like the middle section. But when we restored it, we painted it white to lighten things up a little bit. This is a Tiffany window. It's said to be the most beautiful Tiffany window in the whole house, especially in the early morning when the sun is just rising. The tapestries on the wall, they are original. They're over 300 years old. And they had to be cleaned a number of years ago, and they're very heavy, so they were stretching. So they went to Peebles Island outside of Albany, which is where New York State does its restoration. And each one of the tapestries had 1,500 hours of work done to it, if you can believe that. First, they had to vacuum all the soot from the coal-burning furnace. They had to vacuum it off. Then they washed it in filtered water. And then they stabilized the stitching. And after that was complete, they put felt, heavy felt on the back of it, and Velcro patches so that they could put it back up and it wouldn't be stretching so much. And the next time it has to be, it was originally the straight leg Federal towers were not attached, but when the Cutting family bought it, they bought it this way. This belongs to the Cutting family, these platters, and the tops of those towels. Okay. 8. It was Mrs. Cutting's parents' 50th golden wedding anniversary. Here are her parents. Here's Mrs. Cutting, here's Mr. Cutting, and then she has her brothers and their wives here. Here's her older sister. And here are the 4 children of Mr. and Mrs. Cutting.
Over the
William
shoulder down. Una over the shoulder down.
Mrs. Cutting. This is
Mrs. Cutting.
Yes.
Mr.
Cutting. The heads of the table. Right. And her parents who are celebrating their wedding anniversary. And then their 4 children. William, Justine, Bronson, and little Olivia. Yep.
Oh, so
For that.
get everybody.
They got everybody, yes they did. Or the morning room, this is where the Cutting family had their breakfast. You know, their dinners were there, breakfast was here. Nice, light, airy room. Kind of makes you want to get up to come in here and have breakfast, almost. This is the last room that has the quarter-sawn parquet wood flooring, again, a different pattern. This fireplace is a glass mosaic Tiffany fireplace. So this is designed by Tiffany. And the colors of the room are taken from the colors in the mosaic glass. This is plaster molds. When we decided to restore the house, a lot of work had to be done because there was a lot of paint. We didn't want to destroy these beautiful moldings. So they had to they had to chip, this is plaster, they had to chip all the paint off to get, there were many layers of paint and they wanted to know the original color of the room. Took a long time, many, many hours of work. Volunteers used dental tools to try to get the paint off. Lots of times, this was one of the last rooms that was restored, and lots of times when I would bring a group in here, there would be volunteers working with X-Acto knives and dental tools getting that paint off. And they left one section not done, so that as we leave the room, you can look and see how it looked before they restored it. This table is a butler's table. This is not the table that Mr. and Mrs. Cutting had, but they had one just like it. And it's got a dual purpose. Like if I'm the butler, I can serve everybody at the table. Here I am, I can serve
That
everybody.
makes sense, now I understand.
And everybody seated gets a view. Nobody's back is towards this beautiful window, and everybody gets a view of the Connecticut River and the Great Lawn. There are also chairs that have cherubs on them, little angels, and Mrs. Cutting liked that, and she had chairs with cherubs. These are not the original chairs, but a local artist painted those cherubs on the chairs. Let's see. This room right here used to be the potting room. Now it's the office. It's the office for the Arboretum. But originally it was a potting room because there was a drain on the floor. There was a drain on the floor. It was used to arrange the flowers for the house. There were 4 greenhouses on the property, one for roses only. Mrs. Cutting loved fresh flowers in the house. And even when they were in their townhouse in Manhattan, they'd have the flowers shipped over so that she'd always have fresh flowers. Now, as we go in, we're going to be going into the servants section soon. And remember I told you that the house was heated right from the beginning. The servants' quarters weren't heated right away. Later on they were heated, but their heat was not as good as the heat for the family. So you know, in the wintertime, especially when you bring groups in, it's a little colder when you go into the servants' quarters. Now you won't notice the difference because the heat is not on. And you'll notice that the walls are plainer, the floor is no longer this was the other. So this is the picture of the English family evening. Food was prepared in this kitchen. The subway tiles, they're original. This cabinet, this is original. There is another set of china in here. Sometimes we use this china on the table because
Plates are from China.
we replace it sometimes, we switch it. Ancestors of people who worked for the Cutting family remember that there was blue and white china often on the table, so we have that set.
Blue and
white, yeah. These are call boxes. This one was the original call box. It was run by a low voltage battery. And then when the house was electrified, they added those other 2 call boxes so that, you know, the family, if they needed something, they could call the servants and the servants would know what room they needed to go to. The ceiling is not original. The ceiling, when this room was restored during the pandemic, and the ceiling was a mess. But instead of, you know, taking the whole ceiling and replastering, they put a tin ceiling, and that's pretty typical for that time, in the late 1800s, early 1900s. It's either coal-fired or wood-fired.
And inside,
I can't open that up, but I can tell you about it at any rate. There were probably more than one stove originally in this kitchen because they had to feed a lot of people, so there would have been more than one stove. There are no knobs. You can't turn it to high, low, medium. So what they would do is, it was hottest in the center. So if you wanted something to really boil, you put it in the center. Then if you wanted it to just cook a little bit, you would move it to the side so there's less heat. Same with the oven. You can't set it to 350 or 425 degrees because there are no knobs. But when they were baking and roasting things, if you wanted a lot of heat, you left it closed. If you wanted less, you pulled it ajar a little bit. That's how they regulated the temperature of the stove. I'll show you the ice box over here. Not a refrigerator, but an ice box. And there would have been more than one in this, in the kitchen also, because now this is how it works, or ice box. Ice would go in the top, and there are 3 ponds on the property. Frederick Law Olmsted designed those 3 for the whole year. So they would take a big chunk of ice, put it in the top, the cold air would flow down, and this is where the food would be in this section. Then the ice would melt, and down at the bottom there's a pan, there would be a pan, and the ice would melt and the water would collect, and it would be the kitchen maid's job to empty the footman. They had their quarters up there. That's where their
এটি
babies were.
দ্বিতীয়
The women who worked
তলায় যাওয়ার মানে
house,
উপরে যাওয়ার সিঁড়ি।
that's where we're gonna go now. We're gonna see their rooms. Okay? This is Tiffany glass.
আমরা উপরের দিকে যাচ্ছি দ্বিতীয় তলায়। ওইটা তৃতীয় তলায় যাওয়ার রাস্তা, বাট আমরা এখন দ্বিতীয় তলায় যাচ্ছি। আমরা এখন দাঁড়িয়ে আছি দ্বিতীয় তলায়। Excuse me, sir. How are you? I'm good. You? Good. আমরা এখন দ্বিতীয় তলায় দাঁড়িয়ে আছি। এখন দেখাবো থাকার যে রুমগুলো ওইগুলো।
The iron beds are original. These faces are of the servants. We just don't know what room they were in. There's no way to know. There were also this was if the family was here for their Christmas holiday, they used the solid door to keep the heat in. But if they were here during summer, which is most of the time, they used this door because it has the louvers at 2 doors. Yeah. They would use this one so that they could get a breeze because it was hot up here. No air conditioning. So they get a breeze with this door, and they have privacy as well. This is a linen closet. You know, easy with ash, wood is white ash. There are 2 cedar closets in the attic that repel moths. That east wing that I told you they built, that special servants wing for the higher ups. There was a
এটি
hierarchy
laundry
of
room.
the servants. The housekeeper, the laundress, the cook, they were, you know, they were uppity, you know, so they had their place there. And there's a wheelchair in here too.
এই হচ্ছে laundry,
That was used
iron.
by the woman who was, who had her leg amputated.
You were so nice.
এটি আরেকটি বেডরুম, অনেকগুলো বেডরুম এখানে।
Now at the end of the day,
একটি হুইল চেয়ার। এই কক্ষে যে থাকতো, এটা তারই ছবি। এটি একটি ল্যাম্প।
Yes, on the right,
হাতে কাজ করা খুবই সুন্দর একটি নকশি করা হাতের কারুকাজ।
Pretty much the same, except the sink in the servants' bathroom is cast iron.
এই যে একটি টয়লেট, আর টয়লেটের ভিতরে যে আসবাবপত্রগুলো
Here's number five.
সরি
88.
রাউন্ড স্যার ওই যে ছেলেদের দেখলেন
জি জি
ওই দোকান আছে ওর ছবি আছে এখানে।
আচ্ছা
He had very delicate health. He had tuberculosis. You're not familiar with tuberculosis? It's a disease, a lung disease.
Oh, like this.
He was very fragile in his health, and so he wasn't very athletic. He did ride horseback, but not much. You know, he just was very weak. And he went to Harvard, and he didn't finish his last year, even though he was a wonderful student. He didn't finish his last year because of his lung condition. So he left before his senior year and moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico, because New Mexico is very hot and dry. It was better for his breathing. So that's why he moved. Franklin Roosevelt. This is Bronson, and this is Franklin Roosevelt, President Roosevelt, because he was a senator and
Oh,
he
right,
worked with him.
Can you please tell me in which area in Long Island, in here, in New York? Senator from New York?
No, from New Mexico.
Oh, New Mexico.
Yeah, he
Okay.
became a senator. Thanks.
All right.
I'm glad I could clear that up. Yeah, he became, yeah. He never moved back here. He always stayed in New Mexico because of
Senator in which year?
from 1927 until 1935 when the plane went down.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Now I can study on it.
Yeah. So, just like the same chandelier in Mrs. Cutting's bedroom, same one. And look at the beautiful view that he had. We're above the breakfast room. The breakfast room is right down below. Remember those windows in the breakfast room? What?
Yes, I told them.
Okay. All right, this was Justine's room. Justine was the second child of Mr. and Mrs. Cutting. She was born in Morristown, New Jersey in 1879. She was quite the woman of her age. She was an expert marksman. She liked to hunt. However, she did most of her hunting on the property because ladies were not supposed to go to the Southside Sportsman's Club. It was a men's club. They allowed her to go because she was Mr. Cutting's daughter, but they didn't really like it so much. So she did most of her hunting on the property. She was also an expert equestrian. She rode horseback. She rode whip, which means she raced with horse-drawn wagons. So she was quite the woman. And she was the musician of the family, very talented at music. That's why we have the Belmont organ. That's not her organ, but we put it here because she was a musician. And that's why we put it here. The fireplace is a Tiffany glass fireplace, blue glass fireplace, so it's quite a lovely fireplace. When she became older, she married a gentleman named George Cabot Ward. He was from England. He was Catholic, so she converted to Catholicism. She was Episcopalian. The family was Episcopalian. The fixtures are original. The latches on the windows are quite lovely. They're original silver latches. So this was the bathroom that Justine shared with her little sister Olivia. Okay, this was Olivia's room, a little Olivia. She was named for her mother, so they called her Little Olivia. She was born here in Westbrook in 1892. She married a gentleman named, why is it escaping me? I can't remember. It doesn't matter. I don't remember, but it was not a happy marriage. Again, not a happy marriage. And they divorced fairly soon afterwards. So no grandchildren still for the Cutting family. Now Olivia, she's the one who came back to Westbrook after her father died. She came back to live in Westbrook and take care of her mother when her mother was quite old. And she's the one who made the arrangements for the State Park and Recreation Commission to take over. You know, they donated the park. They donated their home, I should say, and the property to the Long Island State Park and Recreation Commission with a board of trustees which still exist. And she's the one who made all of the final arrangements. Her parents wanted this to be 91 and 97, I'm not sure, acres. And she took care of, she took the furniture at the end, whoever wanted it, they gave the furniture to family, they gave some things to the servants, and then they burned all of the papers, all the records of the family, because at that time, wealthy people did not want other people to know their business. This is the first room, this was her writing room. This is where Mrs. Cutting would do her correspondence, her writing to her friends, her whatever she had to write, she would do it here. In later years, she had a secretary that helped her, Mrs. Hopper, and she would post everything. There's a little porch right off the writing room, as you can see here. And then they showed, when the room was restored, they kept this here to show you what it once looked like. So we're not sure whether this is painted wallpaper or is it fresca, which means that they painted things on damp plaster. We're not sure exactly what it was, but this is how it looked at one time. Bedroom of Mrs. Cutting. Mr. and Mrs. Cutting did not share a bedroom. His bedroom was across the way. That was his bedroom originally. Mr. Yeah. Mrs. Right. Kind of a nice thing. You shouldn't have to listen to him snore or whatever. You know, wealthy people didn't share a bedroom. That's the way it was.
Sometimes a person needs the privacy individually. Whenever needed, then come to
Right. Absolutely. You're absolutely right.
As I do.
Okay. And here's the chandelier, original chandelier. Remember I showed it to you in Bronson's room? It's exactly the same.
Right.
It was original. It's got a gas pipe that would lead.
Right.
This is original. This belonged to Mrs. Cutting. It's a Chippendale table and chairs. This was Mr. Cutting's wardrobe. It was in his bedroom. This is a beautiful ceiling, plaster molded ceiling. It's the only detailed ceiling in the whole house. And the fireplace is a beautiful fireplace as well, with plaster molds. It's the only fireplace mantle like it in the whole house. It's quite lovely. It's in this position. This did belong to the Cutting family. It was downstairs in the entrance hall next to the fireplace, but it was moved up here because it has many original. This was her garden dress. Now, that's her garden dress, not meaning that she got on her hands and knees and weeded. No, she went out to the garden and enjoyed it. And this was the bathroom that they shared. So then they would have privacy.
এটি তাদের ড্রেসিং রুম।
After they built the annex with the guest rooms in the annex, Mr. Cutting moved to a bigger room. He moved to the guest room here in this hall, and this became their oldest son's bedroom. Their oldest son was William Jr. He was born in Manhattan in 1878. He also had tuberculosis very badly. He graduated from Harvard his junior year. He had finished everything by his junior year. He graduated from Harvard, and he moved to England and became a diplomat. In England, he met and married an aristocratic lady from Ireland, Lady Sybil Cuffy, her name was. And they had one child, Iris. So the Cutting family had only one grandchild. That's all they had, Iris.
And now living in
A diplomat, and they moved around, and mostly they lived in either Italy or Egypt, because again, he needed that hot, dry climate for his tuberculosis. He was ill, quite ill. He was gathering material for a lecture series he was going to be giving at Harvard, and he got pneumonia, and he died in 1910. He was only 31 years old. So Iris and her mother, Lady Sybil Cuffy, moved back to Italy, his name, and he had an estate in Tuscany called La Fauche. It was falling apart. His family didn't have the money to restore it, but she did. So Iris restored that house to its original beauty, and they had 3 children. Gianni, they had one son, Gianni. Unfortunately, he died at age 8 of pneumonia. And then they had 2 daughters, Benedetta and Donata. Those daughters are still alive. They're in their early 80s, and they still live in Tuscany, and they have cottages in Tuscany that people can rent. Home, he died. That was in 1912. He was 62 years old when he died. Mrs. Cutting was devastated. So she had that door, you see that roll-top door, fire door. She had that installed, and she no longer wanted to entertain big deal. You know, she didn't want a lot of guests anymore. So that was kept closed. Once a year it was open, and then the staff would clean it thoroughly. Then it was closed again for the rest of the year. She wore black or gray for the rest of her times. It was a hard time. I want to show you, I'll see if I can take you into the room where the director is now, because that became Mr. Cutting's bedroom. If he's not busy, he lets me go in. So I'll knock on the door and see. He's busy, I can hear him talking. So I would.
But those rooms are what?
They were the guest rooms.
Guest rooms.
There are 4 of them,
Okay.
and each of the rooms has its own bathroom, it has its own closet, beautiful view of the property. In fact, and one of the bathrooms has a shower. It's the only shower in the whole house. Most of the other bathroom, all the other
Those
rooms
are, those 4 rooms are for the guests.
Yes, they were for the guests.
এটি
Now,
অরিজিনাল ম্যাপ।
originally, those Tiffany windows were here, but when they added this annex, they had to take those. Right, so we'll go down. And then we'll go back up, and I'll show, I do want to show you a couple of them.
জেন না কেউ ওরা দুজন যাক
This is that.
আমরা এই পাশটি এতক্ষণ ঘুরে ঘুরে দেখলাম।
And again, you go from one room to the next.
এটি হচ্ছে এই ভদ্রলোকের বাড়ি। এখন আমরা উপরের দিকে যাব, যেখানে ফটো।
Servants' quarters up here. Thank you.
ওয়েলকাম মিস।
Enjoy the rest of your day.
আমাদের ট্যুর সম্পন্ন হলো। তো আমরা শুনবো এখন আদিত্য ভাইয়ের মুখ থেকে এই বাড়ি সম্পর্কে।
এই বাড়িটি আসলে বাড়ি সম্পর্কে বলার চেয়ে আমি বলতে চাই এটি একটি 19 শতকের আমেরিকান একজন ধনাঢ্য ব্যক্তির যে শিল্পরস, যে চিন্তা এবং তার উপার্জিত অর্থের যে ব্যবহার, যেটি তিনি করে জীবনে শুধু গ্রীষ্মকালীন একটি বাড়ি নিজের মনের মতো করে তৈরি করেছেন। কি অসাধারণ এই বাড়িটির পরিবেশ! ভেতরে প্রতিটি কক্ষ আমরা ঘুরেছি, সেই সময়ের ব্যবহৃত জিনিসপত্র দেখেছি। তিনি যেভাবে সব বিষয়গুলিকে সাজিয়েছেন, এটি তার নিজের বাড়ি শুধু মনে হয় না, মনে হয় যে পৃথিবীতে মানুষের অনেক বড় দায়িত্ব আছে। তিনি সেই দায়িত্ব পালন করেছেন, কারণ তার বন্ধু বান্ধবকে তিনি কোথায় বসতে দেবেন, তিনি পরিবারের মানুষদেরকে কোন কোন কক্ষে কিভাবে রাখবেন, তিনি বাসায় যারা কাজ করবেন তাদের জন্য কি কি ব্যবস্থা রাখবেন, সব কিছু সুগভীরভাবে করেছেন। এইরকম চিন্তা কিন্তু আজকের যুগের মানুষ করে না। আজকের যুগের মানুষ যেভাবে ভাবে, তার নিজের কথাই চিন্তা করতে থাকে, তার সন্তানদের কথা চিন্তা করতে থাকে, এবং মনে হয় যে এই মানুষটি মনে হয় পৃথিবী থেকে কোনোদিন যাবে না। কিন্তু তিনি বুঝেছিলেন তিনি একদিন চলে যাবেন, এবং এটি খুব ক্ষণস্থায়ী একটি জায়গা। যতদিন তিনি আছেন তার নিজস্ব মানুষদেরকে তিনি কতটা ভালো রাখতে পারবেন, সেই স্বপ্ন, সেই ব্যাপারটি তিনি এখানে বাস্তবায়ন করে গেছেন।
ধন্যবাদ আদিত্য ভাই। আলহামদুলিল্লাহ, এই বাড়ির যে ইতিহাস আমার ক্যামেরার মাধ্যমে তুলে ধরার চেষ্টা করলাম। আশা করি আপনাদের ভালো লাগবে, ভালো লেগেছে। এই বাড়ির ইতিহাসটা যতটা সুন্দর ছিল শুরুতে, আমার অবাক লেগেছে যে শেষটা কষ্টদায়ক। প্রত্যেকটা জিনিসেরই যখন একটা মানুষ সৃষ্টি করে, একটি বাড়ি, একটি বাড়ি যখন একটা মানুষ নির্মাণ করে, অনেক স্বপ্ন নিয়ে নির্মাণ করেন। সেটা হোক কুঁড়ে ঘর, হয়তোবা এরকম একটি রাজপ্রাসাদ। তার একের পর এক জেনারেশন আসবে, সন্তানরা আসবে, তারা এটাকে কিভাবে ধরে রাখবেন এবং এটাকে মূল্যায়ন করবেন, এটা একান্তই তাদের ব্যক্তিগত ব্যাপার। কিন্তু আমরা অনেক সময় ভুলে যাই যে একটা মানুষ অনেক কষ্টের বিনিময়ে একটা, সে হোক কুঁড়েঘর অথবা এরকম রাজপ্রাসাদ, বিশাল এক বাড়ি, সৃষ্টিটা শুরুতে অনেক সুন্দর ছিল, তবে শেষটা এরকম হবে আশা করিনি। যাই হোক, ভিডিওটি অনেক লম্বা হয়েছে, আপনারা দেখলেন, পাশে ছিলেন, সাপোর্ট করছেন আমাকে। কেমন লাগলো ভিডিওটি জানাবেন কমেন্টে। অসম্ভব সুন্দর একটি জায়গা, অসম্ভব সুন্দর একটি বাড়ি। তো ঠিক আছে বন্ধুরা, ভালো থাকবেন। আজকের মতো এখান থেকে, এই সুন্দর একটি জায়গার থেকে বিদায় নিচ্ছি। পরবর্তী ভিডিওতে আবার দেখা হবে। ভালো থাকবেন। আল্লাহ হাফেজ।